This is episode 18 of the Creator-God theory of the Atonement. I've titled it Creator-God Greater Than His Creations with the subtitle, No Need for Any Divine Calculus of Sins, Part 6. Over the last 5 episodes, we set out to dispel the divine calculus model of the atonement by working through the project in 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 was recognition. Here we made explicit what was always implicit in the calculus model. The assumption that justice operates through a divine ledger, a system that tracks sinners and sins, assigns values, and calculates an exact penalty that must be paid. Simply exposing this hidden assumption so often taken for granted completed the first phase. Phase 2 was examination. We then asked whether this divine calculus model could withstand scrutiny. First, we tested it against common sense moral reasoning, our everyday understanding of justice and accountability, and found that it failed even this basic test. Second, we measured it against a reality-based checklist for theories of the atonement. There it failed again because it violates the foundational principles of justice required by both the vicarious and the infinite nature of the atonement. Phase 3 is reframing. Here we are no longer refining the calculus model, we are replacing it. This reframing phase unfolds through 3 assignments. Our first assignment was to establish the creator-creation greater than principle, that the creator is categorically greater than his creation. Having laid that foundation, we moved to our second assignment, to clarify the infinite and eternal nature of that greater than principle. To do that, we allowed the Book of Mormon prophets, Jacob, King Benjamin, Abinadi, and Amulek, to speak for themselves. They consistently taught that the atonement must be infinite and eternal, and that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, is the creator of heaven and earth, God himself who would come down to redeem his people. This deeper reframing revealed that the creator-God understanding of the atonement is not incidental. It is central to the Book of Mormon witness. These prophets deliberately emphasize that God himself would come down to accomplish redemption. That is where we ended the last episode. Now, with the second assignment complete, we turn to our third and final task, to apply this fully clarified greater than principle and show why there is no need for a divine calculus of sins. So let's turn to that final step. We began this series with a basic idea. The Creator is greater than creation. This greater than principle is not about size, strength, or numbers. It reflects a fundamental difference in category, role, and capacity, not magnitude nor quantity. We see this principle in everyday examples. A parent is distinct from a child, holding authority, guidance, and responsibility, regardless of how many children they have. An artist is distinct from their artwork, holding creative power the artwork itself cannot possess, regardless of how many artworks they create. Similarly, God as creator holds a unique place relative to everything he has made, in capacity, ownership, responsibility, and accountability, regardless of how many creations exist. By focusing on the greater than relationship, we shift away from thinking about calculating sins and sinners, and toward understanding why the Creator God inherently has the capacity to redeem creation without needing a mathematical ledger. Now that we've established the basic greater than principle, that the Creator God holds a fundamentally higher category, role, and capacity than creation, we can make the idea more precise with this expanded formula. The infinite Creator God is greater than the open set of his finite creations. Given this formula, here are 3 things to take note of. 1. Infinite equals inexhaustible potential, not a completed numerical total. 2. The open set of finite creations equals creation is limited and finite, but new instances can always exist. It is open-ended. 3. The greater than symbol equals categorical and relational priority, not numeric comparison. These definitions and distinctions set us up to understand the 2 ways people often interpret greater than and infinite, one as a quantitative, mathematical model, and the other as a categorical, relational model, emphasizing the creator-creation distinction. Many Latter-day Saints instinctively default to a mathematical way of thinking about the atonement. The infinite atonement must outweigh or balance the total of finite sinners and sins. We call this the divine calculus model, where the focus is on numbers, magnitude, balancing scales, and totals. In short, it treats the atonement as transactional and calculative, tit for tat, with each sin matched or balanced by a corresponding suffering. But the Book of Mormon prophets consistently point to something different, a creator-creation model where greater than is categorical and relational rather than numerical, a this for that, with the Creator himself stepping in as Redeemer in place of creation. To see the difference clearly, we can compare the two models, point by point. 4 key ideas will guide the comparison. First, what each model means by the greater than symbol. Second, how each model understands divine justice. Third, how each model understands a potential infinity. And fourth, how Christ's role as Redeemer is perceived. Let's begin with the first, how each model understands the greater than symbol. In the divine calculus model, greater than means numerically greater, greater in quantity. The idea is that Christ's suffering must be large enough to outweigh or counterbalance the total penalty of human sin. But in the creator-creation model, greater than means something very different. It doesn't refer to a larger number at all. Instead, it refers to a difference in category of being. The Creator stands above creation as its source and sustainer. So the relationship is categorical and relational, creator over creation, source over dependent. Now consider divine justice. In the divine calculus model, justice functions almost like moral mathematics. Sins must be counted, weighed, and balanced against a corresponding amount of suffering in order to satisfy the demands of divine justice. But in the creator-creation model, justice is understood categorically and relationally. Because Christ is the Creator, his self-offering carries an inherent sufficiency to redeem his creation. Divine justice is satisfied not through a calculation of sins and suffering, but through the categorically greater, yet accountable, relationship between Creator and creation. Now let's examine what infinite means in each model. In the divine calculus model, infinite refers to magnitude or quantity, a potentially unlimited amount, large enough to offset the accumulated penalty of all sins, past, present, and future. But in the creator-creation model, infinite describes the Creator God's inexhaustible capacity, his boundless scope, power, authority, and relational reach, fully sufficient to redeem all, without tallying sins or counting sinners, past, present, or future. Finally, consider Christ's role as Redeemer. In the divine calculus model, Christ is the Redeemer, but in a calculative sense. His suffering must counterbalance the total punishment required by divine justice. Redemption's sufficiency depends on scale, enough suffering to outweigh the accumulated penalty of sin. But in the creator-creation model, Christ's role is categorical and relational. The Creator God himself steps into creation as the Son of God in the flesh. The infinite sufficiency of the atonement comes not from the quantity of suffering, but from identity, because of who he is. Seen through the lens of the Book of Mormon, the difference between the two models is profound. The divine calculus model operates on a tit-for-tat logic, like a balancing scale. Each sin must be weighed, and Christ's suffering must match the total penalty to satisfy justice. By contrast, the creator-creation model works on a this-for-that principle. The Creator himself steps in, offering his infinite Creator God status and atoning sacrifice in direct exchange for the redemption of the lost and fallen condition of his creation. This is not a calculation, but a fully relational and sufficient act, one that only the Creator himself could adequately fulfill. The Book of Mormon prophets consistently testify to the redemptive logic of this creator-creation model. Ben-Adai declares that God himself shall come down among the children of men and shall redeem his people. Amulek then explicitly identifies the categorical shift from human to divine required for the atonement. For it is expedient that there should be a great and last sacrifice, yea, not a sacrifice of man, neither of beast, neither of any manner of fowl, for it shall not be a human sacrifice, but it must be an infinite and eternal sacrifice. Here Amulek rejects one category of being, the human, and requires a higher category, the divine, infinite, and eternal. This is a categorical change, not a divine calculus of sins, showing that the sufficiency of the atonement comes from the identity and nature of the Redeemer, not the quantity of suffering. Finally, King Benjamin confirms the Redeemer's identity. And he shall be called Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the Father of heaven and earth, the Creator of all things from the beginning. Through these testimonies and others like them, we see that the redemptive logic of the atonement remains consistent throughout the Book of Mormon. Its infinite sufficiency comes from identity, not quantity. Hence, redemption is not a tally of suffering for sin. It is the Creator and Redeemer, Jesus Christ, fully sufficient in himself to redeem all fallen creation, who steps in to save his creation. And thus he shall bring salvation to all those who shall believe on his name. This qualification that salvation comes to all those who shall believe on his name demonstrates that salvation is not a tally of sins or a calculation of punishment. Rather, it comes through faith in Christ, accepting his gospel in full, and following the covenant path to exaltation in the highest glory of the celestial kingdom. The atonement's sufficiency rests on the Creator-Redeemer's identity and relational power, and our participation in salvation comes through belief, obedience, and covenantal discipleship, not through a tit-for-tat divine calculus of sins. To summarize and illustrate the contrast between the Creator-creation model and the divine calculus model of the atonement, let's turn to this diagram. It features both a horizontal and a vertical axis, creating 4 distinct quadrants. We begin with the bottom left quadrant, which represents the fallen condition of humanity, finite, dependent, and estranged. Then we look to the top right quadrant, which represents the resurrection and redemption of mankind through Jesus Christ, creation restored, justice satisfied, and relationship reconciled. In the divine calculus model, best understood as a form of moral arithmetic, the goal is to satisfy the demands of divine justice along the horizontal axis, from left to right. Each sin is treated as a debt owed, which must be matched by a payment made. Justice functions like a scale. The debt must be balanced by an exacting penalty, or punishment, which in this case is both temporal and spiritual death, for the wages of sin is death. Redemption in this framework is achieved by ensuring that every sin has been accounted for, and assigned a corresponding punishment sufficient to fully satisfy the scales of justice. In our diagram, this route from fallen creation, in the bottom left quadrant, to resurrection and redemption, in the top right quadrant, runs through this divine calculus model of justice, illustrated by the colored arrow moving across the horizontal axis, and then upward into the top right quadrant, where resurrection and redemption reside. This is what we previously referred to as the tit-for-tat model, commonly summarized as an eye for an eye. Let us now set the divine calculus model aside and consider the alternative, the Creator-creation model. This model is best understood as categorical and relational. Rather than calculating sins or assigning penalties, redemption comes through God himself descending to redeem his people, accomplishing a categorical exchange of the higher for the lower, Creator for creation. In this framework, justice is satisfied not through arithmetic, but through the sufficiency of the Creator God, whose atoning act redeems the fallen condition of his creation. In our diagram, the route from fallen creation, in the bottom left quadrant, to resurrection and redemption in the top right quadrant, follows a different path, illustrated by the colored arrow moving vertically upward and then across. This is what we previously referred to as the this for that model, Creator for creation, described by the Apostle Peter as the just for the unjust. The purpose of this exercise has been to illustrate and contrast 2 different routes from the fallen condition of mankind to the resurrection and redemption of all creation. Just as importantly, we have seen that the Book of Mormon prophets consistently testify to the vertical path. Abinadi declares that God himself shall come down among the children of men and shall redeem his people. And Amulek identifies the required categorical shift from human to divine, teaching that it shall not be a human sacrifice, but it must be an infinite and eternal sacrifice. In other words, the atonement is not grounded in a moral calculation, but in a categorical exchange where the higher stands for the lower. The sufficiency of the atonement comes from the identity of the Redeemer, not the quantity of suffering. This brings us to the end of this 6-part series. The sufficiency of the Creator God's atoning sacrifice, stands greater than his creation's fallen condition, and therefore requires no divine calculus of sins. In the next episode, episode 19, we will look more closely at the meaning of this divine exchange and what it means for the Creator God to stand in the place of his creation.